Welcome to the Sanity Pulpit if this is the first time you've been here, and welcome back if you've been here before. I'm Philip J. Bradbury, and I'd like to challenge you tonight. I'd like to send you a challenge or a possibility perhaps to consider, and it's this: that whatever you're doing right now in work or anything else, you're overqualified, you're overexperienced. See, there is this way that we do things in this life, in this Western world, I guess, that we are presented with the idea that we don't know anything. And before we can do anything, we need to get the instruction from someone else. So obviously, parents teach us the basics of life, how to eat and be toilet trained and do all of that sort of stuff and get dressed and do our buttons up and all those little things. We do need help. But generally, there's a lot of things that we think we need to teach children, but they actually know if they can just pick things up. They can do it by observation. But we tend to interfere. We want to teach them the right way. And we get frustrated when they're doing it slowly and say, like, just do it this way. And then we get sent off to school because we don't know anything. We're these empty chalices, and we need to have our brains, our bodies, our whatever, our knowing filled up with the knowledge and the skills from all of these incredibly knowledgeable and successful people that we call teachers and professors and all sorts of people out there tell us what we need to do before we get to do it. And then we get to a job. And we can only get a job if we have previous experience in it. So that the idea of learning something on the job is an anathema to our civilization. We have to have learned it, and for some of us, I did accounting, um, and eventually found some really good pills and got over it. But I had to go to university for a long time, and then spend several years as an apprentice, if you like. And whether we're being mechanics or lawyers or architects or, I don't know, engineers, there is some sort of training and there is some sort of apprenticeship. And of course, when people's lives are at stake, when there's important things like brain surgery and aircraft maintenance and things like that, yes, it's really important that we do the right thing. But during the process, there is very little acknowledgement that the student does know something, or that the student can learn something for themselves. Our society seems to need to teach us stuff and then make us do it. And I guess in a way I was lucky. I didn't think so at the time. I thought I was very unlucky and hard done by, but my father was the opposite. He would make me go and do something and I would absolutely stuff it up. And sometimes it was quite painful. Where, for example, when I was probably about 6 or 7, he made me kill my first sheep, a ewe, which was probably twice my weight, and way down low, so her centre of gravity was way below mine, and very difficult just to tip her over after having caught the beast. And then I had to kill her, and I had to sharpen my knife. And the process of me doing that, I cut myself several times, quite badly. And it took a very long time. And what I was supposed to have done was observed my father and the shepherds killing all of these sheep every week and absorbing that those skills, the technique process. And it was a very specific process that you started cutting the skin off from the neck and down the front, and then you'd off the back leg and then off the front leg, and then you'd open it up and then you'd have this skin, and then you could start the rest of it. And if you did it the wrong way round, you ended up in all sorts of trouble. So anyway, that was what my father would do. Whether it was shoeing horses or dehorning cattle or all of these farming, things which tend to be very physical. And if I got it wrong, then I learned. So what I would do is that I would be forced to do something, and one of them was riding bareback. And so there was one day when I was probably 6, I was thrown onto this horse. There was a rather frisky horse, and I was made to gallop up and down the gravel driveway, and I fell off, and I fell off, and I fell off, and I fell off. I think it was 7 times, and eventually my mother was just distraught over my bleeding body, and I was crying, and my father, no, get back on the horse and learn to ride the damn thing. Anyway, eventually, my mother prevailed, and I ended up with a hot bath and chocolate. But after that experience, I was never, ever going to fall off a horse again. I knew the consequences, and I didn't. Well, I did once or twice. I was backed off. But generally, I became an excellent rider. I stuck like a leech onto a horse because I knew the consequences. And through the fear, if you like, and it may be not the best way to learn, but it was a way, through the knowing of consequences, I learned how to stay on a horse, on a slippery um, horse that was galloping and doing all sorts of unexpected turns or whatever. I managed to stay on. And eventually I was rewarded after a year of staying on with a saddle. Um, I, so there was rewards. So my father's method of teaching was to throw me in the deep end. We threw everybody in the deep end. My brothers, the other shepherds, they were given a task to do, and then they would stuff it up. And then my father would step in and show us how to do it the right way. And so that was a particular style of learning that was very difficult for the pupil, but it was amazingly uplifting when we finally got it. It's like, oh my God, I've done it, but not very well. And then he would show us where we'd gone wrong. And so that's the opposite of what we do nowadays, because nowadays we teach people to do it before they have to do it. And so there is nothing of them in there. There is only somebody else's wisdom in there. And so we grow up with somebody else's wisdom. So someone has done this, and this is how you must do it. And then you must follow this process, and then you must follow this process. And whoever is giving these processes to us often have never done it, especially at university. They're university lecturers who have gone up the scale of knowledge and learning lots of formulas and lots of what other people did. And it doesn't matter whether it's philosophy or law or whatever. At university, we are dissuaded from being original. We have to quote what everybody else did in the past. And who knows whether that worked or not in the practical world, but it was the wisdom from the past, and we were never allowed to bring our own wisdom in. So by the time we left university, we'd gone through, before we got to school, learning from parents, we'd then through primary school, and we call it high school over here, and then university. And then, so we'd gone through our whole formative years knowing that anything we need to know has to come from someone else. And it might be from Aristotle, and that's been passed down for 2,000 more years. Or it might be someone 100 years ago who's told somebody who's told somebody who's told somebody. And eventually the Chinese whispers has got it to the stage that we have to learn this process. And it means that people come out of university often very incompetent beings. They are competent in themselves, but they do not believe in themselves, and they have had no experience of having experience and learning for themselves, if you get what I mean. And I think I do. Their only experience is copied from someone else. Plagiarism, that's what we're all into. So we need somebody else from the past to say, this is what you need to do. And so we all follow along like little ducks in a line, or sheep. And that is the way that we have learnt. And I remember when I there was another recording, I talked about my need to get out of shyness. I was terrified of people, and at 40, it was kind of like a birthday present. I needed to get out of it. I need to break away from being the shyest person in the world. So I chose to be a teacher, and off I went, and became what we call a polytechnic teacher of accounting. And so I did this for a year, and I had no idea. I had no experience of teaching. I was just thrown into it, terrified for the first 6 months, and then started to enjoy it and just had fun by the end of it. And then after a year being at the Polytech, they said, look, everybody who teaches here must have a certificate of teaching. A CAT, right? A certificate of adult teaching it was. And so when I started this course, I said to the chap running the course, said to Ian, I said, look, it's like my life. I do everything backwards. I've been teaching for a year, and now I'm coming to you to learn how to do it. And he said, absolutely perfect. He said, you should not come here having no experience. Because he said, if you come here, when you learn from me, he said, what you will take away is Ian, Ian's teaching. Because you're an empty, naive vessel in a sense of teaching. Whereas if you've done it for a while, then you've brought your own, who you are, your isness to what you're doing. You've stumbled and you've made mistakes and you've learned and you've come up with your own unique, particular way of teaching. And there is no one way, of course, as everybody's, there's 100 ways of being a teacher, thousands. So he said, what will happen is now that you've had a year of teaching, you will now just add some small pieces that I will teach you that will add to who you are without diluting the true being, the true teacher that you are. And I thought, that sounds a bit like my father. He threw me in the deep end and then taught me the bits afterwards. So I guess I've been quite lucky when I look back that I've had teachers that I didn't ask for, but they happened, who've forced me in a sense to have experience, and then they have stepped in and helped me with the finer points without losing who I am. And that's why I said at the start, there's a possibility that you are overtrained, you're overqualified, because that training and qualification is not who you are. They have taken you, perhaps, there's a possibility, as, if you like, an empty, naive vessel and kind of pushed you aside, and what is in you now, as in the sense of what you do, is them. You are teaching them to your whatever you're doing, whether you're a mechanic or whether you're I don't know what qualifications you might have, whether it's kind of intellectual accounting and lawyers, or if it's practical mechanics and bulldozer drivers or whatever. Whatever you do is unlikely to be the full who you are. And in a sense, we have become an overqualified, overtrained group of people. And because that, we always look for others for our answers. And so my challenge for you tonight is to just look at what you do and think about how much of that is you in there. How many times have you been told to do something and said, I'm sure I could do it a better way. I'm sure and it's not wrong. There's 1,000 ways of doing whatever we're doing. But for you, there may well be an absolutely different way of doing this, skinning a sheep, as you say. There are many ways of killing a cat. But you have not been allowed to do it. We have been stifled in our unique beingness. And so Joseph Campbell, the great philosopher, teacher, mythologist, whatever we call him, talked about the hero's journey. And in that journey, he's a circle, and there's many parts to that circle, but the three main parts are, first is separation, or isolation, if you like. Oh, shouldn't use that word, isolation. Separation. So we're standing in our normal life. This is what we do in this life. We just kind of get on and do our groceries and have kids and have incomes and drive our cars around. We do the normal life, and it's kind of regular. We know everything, and we know exactly where the the products are on the shelf and everything. And then something comes along and shifts us off our normal life. Something pushes us away. And I'm sure most of us have had some sort of drama, let's say. We've been made redundant. We've lost huge amounts of money. We've lost businesses. We've lost relationships. People we've loved have died. We've had our own deaths, in a sense, of things that have maybe bodily bits don't work, our health. And there's challenges that we have been pushed off our rails. We were steadily carrying along on our little train, chug, 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 and then something happened and pushed us off. And that is the start of the hero's journey. Now, people say good things should, sorry, people say bad things should not happen to good people. And, people have, here in Brisbane, we have floods and we have fires and all that sort of stuff. And so people lose their properties and their houses and their businesses, and that is traumatic. It's really devastating. And, having experienced it, it is horrendous. And people say that's not fair. Well, Joseph Campbell would say that is the most amazing experience you can have. It is the greatest opportunity for you to grow as a person, to become the hero in your life. And that moment when something happens, when something pushes us off our rails, off our regular life, that is the start of the hero's journey. That's the separation, shall we say. And it happens in all of the stories, whether it's um, Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz and Luke Skywalker. I mean, Dorothy, I think there was a tornado in Kansas, and suddenly she found herself somewhere else. Um, Alice in Wonderland, Luke Skywalker, all of those stories, they're doing their normal, ordinary life, and something hits them, and they're forced into another world that's foreign, that's unusual, that's, yeah, it's just a whole new discovery that they have to take. And so all of those stories are archetypes of our lives. And so when something goes wrong, Joseph Campbell would say that's absolutely right, because that's when your life actually starts. And from there, there's the separation into a new life, into a new experience, it might be a new country, it might be a new relationship, it might be on your own, a new relationship, it might be starting again financially, it might be having to deal with a health illness situation. So this a new life has started for you, and that is not unfair. From the Joseph Campbell point of view, it is the most fair thing that can happen, because that is when real life starts. And then we go through, first of all, the separation, which we've just talked about. The next thing is the challenge, which we are then forced in some way to face the thing that we most fear, or the things that we most fear. And Joseph Campbell talks about the dragon that we must slay. And so that's the fears. And so when we have decided to take on a new job, if we decided to publish a book and then we get rejections, or the new job, there's all sorts of problems with the boss, or whenever we're thrown into this new situation, there are, if you like, problems. The dragon that we must slay. And according to Joseph Campbell, the dragon is a many-scaled dragon. It's a dragon with scales on it, and on every scale is written, thou must do this, thou must not do that, and so on. And all of these musts and must nots, oughts and ought nots, shoulds and should nots, they are the things that we must, if you like, vanquish, because we've lived a life till now with all of these rules, and we've created them, and our teachers, shall we say, have created them for us. And all of these things that we must do, and they are the things that are in the way of our true growth. And so we try and slash them, as the warrior does with the dragon, slashing at each scale which says we must do this and we must not do that, and so on, the oughts and ought nots. And then eventually the dragon becomes too much. and we must stop and give in. And that is when the surrender happens, when we surrender to who we are, our the worst aspects of who we think we are, when we surrender to that and allow that to be, then something dissolves within us and we're able to flow into a new state of mind. And then we come back, and then there's a return, which is always separation, challenge, and then the return. And the return is once Dorothy has gone through all of her tests underground, I guess, with rabbits and Mad Hatters, and Luke Skywalker's fought Darth Vader and chopped his head off, and then discovered, whoops, the head that he chopped off was actually his face in the helmet. Oh, how did that happen? So there's these challenges, and eventually we vanquish them, not by fighting them, because fighting something simply makes it more real. Once we allow it, love it, embrace it, become the essence that we absolutely are. And then we can eventually return to our community, if you like. The return is what always happens at the end. And even in the Bible, we have the prodigal son. I was trying to think of the prodigal son. And it's absolutely unfair, isn't it? There's these two sons, and one stays at home and dutifully works on the land and looks after the property and mum and dad, and the other sod just goes off, is given a whole lot of money, spends it, wine, women, and song, whatever he does, we're not sure, but he has this wild, adventurous life. And he does not deserve to be welcomed back, according to the one who stayed behind, because it's so unfair. I'm the one who did the right thing. And yet the irresponsible one who went out and ventured, came back with nothing, is fated by the Father. And that is absolutely the choices that we get to make. We can stay in our safe world, not having challenges, not trying new things, not experiencing things, staying out of the way. If we fear something, we run from it. If we fear relationships, we stay alone, rather than leaping in and trying to do it better. And so that's the safe way. But there's no celebration, not from anybody, actually, not even from ourselves. Whereas when we step out, when we have the separation, and we challenge and fight and then love the dragons that we are, we then can embrace the true bigger person that we are, and then we can return with balloons and celebrations and wine, women drinking and whatever. The Father welcomes us back. And so the return, if you think about all of those stories, whether it's Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy and Luke Skywalker, all of those, what did they come back with? Piles of wealth, a new car, a new house, new toys? No, they came back with nothing. Same with the prodigal son. He came back with nothing. He spent it all. And the idea is that we come back with nothing except our life. And Deepak Chopra says, if I talk to you from my mind, I may influence your mind. I may touch your mind. If I talk to you from my heart to your heart, I may touch your heart. If I talk to you from my life, I will touch your life. And that is the return of the hero who's been out, vanquished themselves, and we don't have to obviously go out with swords and guns blazing and do all sorts of crazy things. They might be the fact that we stop being an architect and become a sculptor, which is, that's a challenge. And we learn through those experiences, or we might give up art and become an accountant. I don't know. We find we need at some stage to teach ourselves. We need to step away from those who are with the utmost best intentions teaching us what we must and must not do, there is a time when we need to step past those and teach ourselves and find within ourselves all of those, the gold, all those amazing abilities we never knew we had until we got tested. And when we come back into from our quest, if you like, from our dragon slaying quest, we come back from that, we come back with nothing. No more goods, no more toys. We come back with our story, with our life. And that is what enriches our community. So I'm going to suggest to you again that you may well be overqualified in the sense that maybe it is now time, I don't know your life, it may well be time to start learning from yourself rather than from others. Have a ponder on it, and thank you for listening, and bless you all.